Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by developing yourself, developing your skills, your habits, your network, and more. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron Hayslip, and today we've got a special episode for you. It's going to be a guest episode, not an episode with a guest, but a guest host that's talking about himself, kind of. But anyway, that special guest is Brian Jenney. And if you don't know who Brian Jenney is, just go to LinkedIn and find him. We'll include his LinkedIn address in the show notes here. But Brian is an incredible teacher. He's passionate about software development, and he has an incredible story that you're about to hear, where he essentially goes from having no idea what he wants to do with his life, even selling drugs. He's extremely vulnerable in this episode, to now becoming an engineering manager and an all-out influencer on LinkedIn, where he builds his own courses. He's got almost 19,000 followers, and he's even doing a lot with Parsity right now in helping us develop some of the best curriculum we've ever had. So I suggest you give this episode a listen, be encouraged by what Brian has to say, and more importantly, be encouraged by the advice he gives and the perspective he gives it from.
Hey, my name is Brian Jenney. I'm a senior engineering manager at Clorox, JavaScript developer, father, and also help others learn to code, and have mentored a ton of people. Write a lot on LinkedIn about imposter syndrome, how to get into tech, JavaScript stuff, and generally how to become a better developer. I'm going to talk a bit about how I got into tech from a very, very non-traditional background, what I would do differently, how I got my first job, and what I would be doing right now if I wanted to get into web development. So I'm an engineering manager now, which is very surprising to me because 10 years ago my life looked completely different, like wildly. And I'm going to share a bit about my past and some of the struggles I had with sobriety, addiction, getting involved in street life, and how I transitioned from that into web development after not knowing how to really use computers, or really using computers for most of my life. But I'll start with an interesting story from about 5 or 6 years ago. I was working as a software developer and also working at a coding boot camp in person in San Francisco. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm from Oakland, California originally. So I was working at this boot camp, and it was a particularly difficult day, right? I'd been doing 2 classes. I was working also full-time, recently had a kid, just generally stressed out, right? And trying to do a lot with a little. So I had one student in the class come up to me after class. I was trying to explain some concept about promises or something kind of difficult that I probably wasn't doing a very good job of. He said, I just don't get this stuff. And I said, well, that's okay. It's normal to not understand it. He's like, yeah, but people like you just get that stuff. You don't know how it is for people like us. And I thought, wow, people like me. And I thought, wow, I've really fooled this guy. And I was actually really happy. I was like, wow, he thinks I'm one of those tech people. He thinks I'm one of those San Francisco tech people. I finally made it. I finally wore the mask long enough that it's become really who I am. Because years before this, before I was learning how to code, I was in a very different type of life. At a young age, I started experimenting with substances, smoking weed and doing stuff like that. I was always a pretty decent student in school. I was, overall fairly good at school and got my work done, but also was really insecure. I lived in Oakland, was the victim of a lot of, petty theft, crime, bullying, some not so small crimes. I had, some pretty traumatic experiences growing up, which I think led me to feel really insecure. And I think I started looking for that security or that confidence in drugs and alcohol. And eventually it spiraled out of control. I went to high school where I continued, experimenting with different drugs. Finally into college where my drinking spiraled completely out of control until I was, drinking in the mornings. I would get my work done. I was always an early riser, oddly. So I would get my work done in the mornings, and I'd basically spend the rest of the day going to class and drinking the entirety. From the age of maybe, 18 until 30, I would say that there was never more than 1 or 2 days, maybe 3 days tops, where I would not drink to excess. At that time, I also got involved in drug dealing, unfortunately. So from age 22 to maybe almost throughout most of my 20s, I was involved in some sort of illegal activity. And you may be thinking, whoa, how did you go from that insane lifestyle? It feels so foreign to me now that I feel comfortable talking about it, but it's definitely something I don't typically like to share because I don't want people to make an assumption about me or think differently about me. So it's not a story I really like to share, but I realize that other people may be going through their own struggles. Maybe they're addicted to something. Maybe they're in a lifestyle that they're not proud of, and they're thinking, how do I get out of it? I really didn't see a road out, to be honest with you. At one point, I had an intervention. I came home Easter Sunday after drinking all night. A friend had crashed a car that night, and my partner at the time, we just had a child. She and my mother had been speaking unbeknownst to me and confronted me that morning. I stumbled in the house at 6 a.m. She came in, my mom, with a letter. And in that letter, she said, you're going to lose your children. You're a disappointment. I don't support what you're doing. I want your partner to leave you. And she is. She's going to, unless you quit. And I'm not here to support you, emotionally, financially, any of the above if you continue this. And so I quit. And I had no clue what that meant. I was furious at the time. I felt betrayed. Typical, addict mind state where I thought everybody's against me and poor me and, everybody's against me. And how could they do this to me? How don't they know how hard this is for me? Completely selfish. But I did. I quit. I didn't know what else to do. I knew it was time. I knew that things were coming to a close. I'd already put part of my illegal lifestyle behind me. At this point, I was working in a community college. A friend of mine hooked me up with a job, and I was grateful to have it. It was my first transition out of the street life, and I was at least working something that resembled a normal life. So, with no drinking or doing other activities, I had a lot of time on my hands that I hadn't known what to do with. I had been drinking for so long and doing partying for so many years, for at least the last decade, that I was like, what do normal people do, like on a Saturday night or a Thursday night or just after work? I felt like I had way more time on my hands than I knew what to do with, and I had this really addictive personality. It wasn't like the addiction just went away. I still had it in my head. I still had this desire that I needed stimulation. I needed something to make me feel confident. So the first thing I picked up was exercise. I started running, and the endorphins I felt from that really were helpful. I appreciated that feeling. I'm like, okay, this feels pretty good. Then at work, one of my tasks working in this community college at the career center, I was like an admin, front desk type person. I'd have to update the website through this really basic CMS, content management system, like WordPress you can think of. So there I was updating it, adding a picture or something. And I think the woman that I was working for, she said, that picture, like it's the size is wrong or something. I said, well, you can't change it through here. So we'll call the webmaster. I said, cool. Called her up. She came in and she opened up the code base and actually started typing in code. And I looked at it, I said, wait, what is this? She's like, oh, this is the code. I'm like, wait, how do you know like where that is? This looks like hieroglyphics to me. I said, how did you know what to do here? She's like, oh, I studied like computer science and I know how to code. This is just basic HTML. And I said, wait, what is that? And I was just like super intrigued because I'm like, wait, is the entire web like built on this stuff? And she really schooled me. She's like, yeah, like this is kind of how the web works. Mind you, I'm not super old, right? I went to college too. In college, I never had a computer. Throughout high school, I never really used a computer. I used the library to write all my essays. I had no interest in working with computers or learning about them. I thought that's for nerds or just people that aren't like me. What the heck do I need to know anything about computers for? So she opened me up to like blew my mind. I'm like, wait, does everybody know this? Apparently not. Apparently not me at least. And I said, how can I learn this? And she said, oh, try like a free site. I forget like if she recommended Codecademy. So anyway, I go to Codecademy and I start learning HTML and CSS and I'm get hooked. Like cue my new addiction. I'm thinking, man, this is amazing. It was so great to like write the code and then watch it render on the screen. And I'm like, well, this is what I got to do. I was also driving Lyft at the time. Lyft, if you don't know, is like Uber, like the Uber competitor, if you're living under a rock maybe. But so Lyft is a ride-sharing service. I was a driver for that and Uber, and I was all throughout the San Francisco Bay Area driving people around. And guess who was my main customer? Software developers. And they'd get in the car, and I'd ask them questions. And they were super polite and nice, like way more polite and nice in retrospect than I could even have imagined. Like the fact that I'd be in the car and we'd make small talk, and they'd say, "So what are you up to?" I say, "Oh, I'm learning how to code." And they say, "Oh, cool. Like, tell me more about it." Developers love to share that kind of stuff. I love to talk about it too, which is why I'm here talking about it to you. So they would give me all sorts of great advice, like, "Oh, you should learn this or that, or here's a book you should try." So I'd get all these books and stuff, and I was writing these really janky sites on CodePen, and I was like, "Wait, how do I get like this? Like, how do they actually get it to the web? Like, this is cool, like on my local machine. Like, I kind of figured that out, but how does it go to the web?" So I went to a meetup, and I met with some other developers who were way smarter than me, and they taught me like about Sublime Text, which at the time was a really popular text editor. And they said, "Oh, you write it here, and you can put it in something like, I forget, a file uploader." This is way before GitHub Pages or any other of the tools that we have nowadays that make uploading a site trivial. So I got this information, and I was even more hooked. I'm like, "Oh, cool, now I can actually put stuff out on the web." And I'm like thinking, man, I want to get hired to do this. I got to get paid to do this. So I went to a coding boot camp that basically just taught HTML and CSS and a little bit of jQuery. I went to this boot camp. It cost me $2,000, which was basically all the money I had at that point. And I just thought, well, I'm going in on it. No one really believed I could do it, to be honest with you, and I don't blame them. My mother was apprehensive. She thought, "Is this really going to work? Like, you don't even use computers. What are you going to do with a coding certificate or whatever?" I mean, it was just completely foreign concept to anybody, to me and my family. I didn't know any software developers that I thought. I went on Facebook, actually, and I said, "Hey, I'm trying to become a software developer. Who out there can help me?" Guess what? A friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine that I hadn't spoken to in maybe a decade, said, "Hey, I'm a software engineer. I'm willing to help you out." I went to his house, and he started helping me write JavaScript. He was a very seasoned developer, really opened my mind and to JavaScript in general. I thought, man, this JavaScript stuff is hard. I don't get this. I'm going to just focus on HTML and CSS, which is what the boot camp was teaching me at the time. Remember, this is 10 something years ago, right? So you could get a job with HTML, CSS, and a bit of JS, even in the Bay Area. In fact, you still can, which is funny to me. I think people overcomplicate that. Anyway, so I go to the boot camp, and even though they didn't teach me a lot more than I did, they gave me the confidence to apply. I was like, "I'm not ready to apply." They're like, "Dude, you got to apply." So I was 8 weeks in the program. They're like, "Man, you already know this stuff. Why aren't you applying?" And I thought, well, like, who am I to apply? I don't know anything. But one thing from being involved in the streets and like doing illegal stuff, selling stuff to people, and dealing with criminals, honestly, and dangerous people, is I learned how to talk to people. I knew how to talk to people. I felt like pretty good about like how to establish rapport with people pretty quickly from my previous life. So I didn't really have a lot of the issues with saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm applying for this job. I'll let them decide." I'd go into jobs in the interviews, which were all in person back then. There was no remote positions. So I'd go throughout Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Oakland, wherever, and I'd go to these job placements. And I was shocked at how nice people were to me. I'd go to interviews, which I had no business going to. I thought, I'm going to get laughed out of the room. But I thought, so what? What's the worst that can happen? They'll laugh me out of the room. I've been through a lot worse than that. Still, didn't make it a lot more. It didn't make it a lot easier. I still was nervous, fighting my nerves. But I thought, hey, this is the price I'm going to have to pay to get this new life I want. I want this really badly. And so I went to a few interviews. I bumbled most of them. I found out that I knew even less than I thought I knew. Somebody asked me about Node.js, and I thought, what the hell is that? People asked me about AngularJS. I thought, what the heck is that? All I knew was some basic jQuery. I just wanted to make email templates. I keep applying, and honestly, within about a month, I got my first offer at Grocery Outlet, a chain of grocery stores throughout Northern California and a lot of the West Coast. They have a small internal web dev department that basically made nothing but internal apps. And I got through a not so difficult interview process. One of the technical questions was, how would you format a phone number using JavaScript? I don't know how I got that correct, but I did. It was like the coding spirit was with me that day. and I nailed the question. I got to the on-site. I met the people, and they liked me enough. They liked me enough. Also, it was through some luck. Absolutely. The guy that interviewed me knew some other person that I had previously worked with. He called that person. And he said, "Hey, is this guy trustworthy? Like, does he seem like he might be able to fit here?" And the guy said he was actually really good to work with. This is when I was like driving a van at a warehouse. This dude knew him from some other like life they were in. I didn't know that other guy either, but hey, I showed up to work on time, and he knew that I was a hard worker. But mind you, this is like me driving a van, like nothing at all to do with web dev technology, anything like that. Between that vote of confidence and me doing all right in the interview, good enough, and another person like dropping out, and the amount of money that I was making there, they hired me. I got hired for around $60,000, which in the Bay Area even back then is pretty much nothing. But that's okay. I was willing to take anything at that point, and I was so proud and happy to get that first job. Now, learning to code, when I got the job, I had to basically relearn to code. So here I was thinking, oh, great, I got a job, web dev. I'm going to be doing HTML and CSS here. Completely wrong. They had me doing full stack web dev from day one. They said, well, we're a C#.NET shop, and we're going to use AngularJS. And I thought, ooh, okay. I know about 0 of those things, so I had to learn on the job. So here I was thinking I learned to code and relearning again. I also had a child, or 2 children, commute, just life in general. And I had to find the time where there was no time to learn this stuff. And so I applied the same strategy that I encourage you to follow if you're trying to learn to code, that's helped me out through these years. I have never been a marathon coding person. Like, I've met people that say, I'm going to work 8 to 12 hours on the weekend, and I'm just going to write all this code, and I'm not going to do anything the rest of the week because I just don't have time. That was not at all how I like to work. I like to have lots of free time in general, and I just don't do well with staring at a screen for 8 hours plus. I don't think anybody really truly does. So I would usually wake up around 6:30 in the morning. I'd wake up basically half an hour than I normally would wake up, and I would do a task related to something I was trying to learn. For example, I was trying to learn C#. So I was doing this C# course at the time. I would learn a little bit, then I would practically apply it. That was the advice from the mentor at work. And the mentor meaning the guy that was basically the senior dev on the team that was going to teach me how to use C#. I was really behind, but I thought, okay, well, we use C# to do these things here. So I'm going to learn how to do these things, write an API in C#. And I'm going to make this API that's going to fetch some data from a SQL table and display it or something. It was fairly basic stuff, but it got me good enough that I thought, okay, now at least I get this. Then I wanted to learn Redux. So I thought, I'm going to put Redux in an AngularJS app. And then I did, and it was really hard. It took me a week. And by the end of it, I'm like, okay, now I kind of get it. I kind of get what's going on. And I'd write notes I'd write notes in my code, comments. I'd write tons of comments explaining what the code was doing in just regular English. I didn't want to make it sound academic. It was just for me. So that way I could explain it to other people. This really helped me out a lot. So being exposed to other developers on the team, which helped me out, doing this bite-sized chunks of work on a daily basis helped me out, and doing small little projects related to the work I was doing made me really practically strong in what I did here. So I got good at working at this particular place because I was using this form of learning. And that's the same way I would probably learn if I was going to start from scratch today. Learning concepts and applying those concepts practically using something like CodePen or Replit or somewhere where you can quickly scaffold up something and get it working and appearing on the screen, so you get some practical knowledge and get that mind-muscle connection. So from then, I basically thought, well, I did pretty well here. I've been here for 2 years. What's next? I knew that if I stayed there, that the technology we were using probably wouldn't take me very far. I could probably be really good at that particular job. I also at that point knew I was underpaid. I was working at a boot camp on the side. I've always been a hustler and always wanted to work additional jobs. Also, I was learning for free essentially by teaching at the boot camp. So here I was working and then going to the boot camp on a couple nights after work to teach, and learning a lot through the curriculum there. I thought, wow, what a great deal. I'm getting paid to learn. I met other instructors there, really solid developers from places like Airbnb, Pinterest, excellent much more senior, and they were very impressive. They taught me a lot too. So here I was getting exposed to them. I found out how much money they were making, and I thought, wait, what? You're making, 100 and plus thousand. You're making almost $250,000. How is that possible? How is anybody doing that? Here I'm making. It was embarrassing at that point. I was still proud of what I did, but I thought, wow, I'm making this. But I didn't know what was possible until somebody shared it with me. Once they shared that with me, I thought, well, as much as I love this place, I think it's time for me to leave and expand and see what else I can do. I did. My salary doubled at the next job, and then I got exposed to a whole other set of challenges and a whole other set of developers and learned the same things. And I went through the same process a few times, job hopping, learning, figuring out what it was that was missing from my tool set, figuring out if the team was going to help me learn more. I was all about skill acquisition at this point until finally I got to a point where I said, I think I feel confident enough in my technical skill that I really enjoy the people side of things. I went to Clorox as a senior developer, went from senior to staff, realized I think they appropriately determined that I was good with people, and I really enjoyed it. So I thought, why not try management? And here I am, basically a junior senior engineering manager, which means that here I am learning again what it means to do the job, thinking I know, learning that I don't, and also have the confidence now from doing this so many times that I know I'll figure it out. And I'll probably at some point need to leave again, to also understand where my gaps in knowledge are and learn from other people so I can keep, improving as a developer and an engineering manager. So that is my very roundabout story about how I got into tech. And if you're listening to this, you're likely either thinking about getting into coding, or maybe you're looking for your first job, or some combination. And what I would do right now, if I was trying to get into web development, I'd feel like people spend a lot of time overcomplicating which technologies and things to use. In general, software development will take you far as a career if you focus on concepts and fundamentals over frameworks. That being said, you can't ignore frameworks. Learning React, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, of course, Node, Express, Mongo, SQL. These are core technologies that are so popular that they are the safest bet to learn. And I would add to that nowadays learning Next.js is going to become one of the things that is going to be a requirement, I believe, in the coming year. That is one of my bets. I think TypeScript and Next.js are great bets to learn on the side if you have the bandwidth and the capacity to do it. If you don't, learning JavaScript, React, these are things that are going to take you far. You might say, well, what about Angular? What about Vue? What about some other framework I heard of? Yeah, those are great. But if I was playing it safe, I would learn the ones I just talked about, because they're just so ubiquitous in the industry now. Also, I would look for mentors. Your mentors can be through a book. Kyle Simpson has an excellent series of books, through podcasts like this, meeting people at meetups, finding people that are a few steps ahead of where you are right now, and figuring out, how do I get to that person, into that person's shoes right there. That's going to be so much more helpful than reading a ton of Medium articles. Also, I would say choose a path and stick to it. There's a lot of advice out there. Here I am giving you advice. And there are other people who say, oh, only network. Other people say, oh, only apply on LinkedIn. Other people say, you can't learn through YouTube. Other people say, you can only learn at a boot camp or getting a CS degree. I'd say we're all right and we're all completely wrong. All these things work. I've seen them work. I've worked with hundreds of people over the years to learn to code, to get hired, to go from zero to hired, and now they're well into their careers, and some people just starting their careers. I've seen so many things work that I have changed my opinion dramatically, and know that it's more about consistency rather than intensity. And it's also, no one has the true way. Get the skills, learn to apply them practically, apply before you're ready, get used to rejection, be consistent, hold out, and then recalibrate when you see things that are not working. I can nearly guarantee you're going to get where you want to get. The problem that most people face is not that they need some additional skill, or that they need to change the color of green on their resume for the 100th time. It's that they haven't been consistent enough, and they haven't learned when to recalibrate. For example, if you send a resume out to 100 people or 1,000 people, you get zero feedback, or no one calls you back. that's a sign you should have changed your resume. Maybe hire somebody to do that for you. If you go to a bunch of interviews and you fail every single one of them, that's a sign that maybe your skills aren't where they need to be and you need to fix that. But people prematurely do these things. They don't wait for feedback in order to do that. So then they end up spinning their wheels and going into what I call hamster style learning mode, where they're on this constant treadmill of learning another framework, another language, another Udemy course. When in reality, if you double down on the fundamentals and the core technologies that you have learned, it's likely going to get you a lot further. So, hope that was helpful for you to know. Always apprehensive about opening up my own past, but I think it's also shows that, hey, I'm definitely not the best developer, definitely not the worst either. I came from a very non-traditional background, and I've found a lot of success in this career, and I would recommend it to anybody that finds it enjoyable. I certainly love doing it. I love the technical aspect. I love the people. I think the community in tech is amazing, despite what you may see on Twitter or X or wherever, and that there's a lot of people out there that are more than willing to help you. We love to share advice, and I hope that you've gotten some benefit out of hearing what I've had to share. Thanks for listening.
That does it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. Huge shout out and thank you to Brian for being vulnerable and sharing so much of his past and experience with us. He's going to be on coming up in an episode where we'll actually get a chance to interview him, sit down and talk about the more of the details around his journey and the advice that he gives. If you want to join Brian and I and learn how to become a software engineer, you can do that through our online code school, Parsity. That is PARSITY.io. Check it out. We've got a revolving program that's an entry program called Dev 30, where over the course of 30 days, we will work on your mindset with a small daily podcast. We'll work on your habits by helping you set up your coding first schedule and your daily habits so that you can get some time to learn how to code every day. We'll work on your skills, obviously, by teaching you JavaScript, and we'll work on your network by encouraging you to begin writing on LinkedIn. Brian and I both have done this extensively, Brian more so than me, but it really works to basically build this network of people who could be great connections, whom you can add value to and get value from. So definitely check that out. It's dev30.xyz. Again, dev30.xyz, and we'll see y'all back next week.